Some of the most financially educated people in the world are quietly broke. Not unemployed, not irresponsible, not reckless with money. They followed the plan almost perfectly. They went to school, they studied hard. They earned degrees that took years of discipline and thousands of dollars. They built respectable careers. They earn more today than their parents ever did. And yet, many of them feel the same quiet pressure every month. The paycheck arrives. Bills move quickly. Savings grow slowly. And the future feels strangely fragile. No one panics about it. From the outside, everything looks stable. But behind the scenes, something fundamental is missing. Because there is a rule about money, a simple rule, that most people never learn during 12 years of school. Or 4 more years of higher education, not because it's complicated, but because the system that teaches us how to succeed never actually teaches us how money works. So people graduate knowing how to calculate formulas, analyze literature, and memorize historical timelines. Yet they enter adulthood without understanding the basic structure that determines whether money will ever feel stable in their lives. And by the time they realize something is wrong, years, sometimes decades, have already passed. What's strange is that this rule isn't hidden. It's simply never emphasized. And once you see it clearly, you start noticing something uncomfortable. The entire education system quietly avoids one of the most important financial truths in adult life. What education misses completely for most of our lives, the message is simple. Study hard, get good grades, choose a stable career, earn a good income. This formula is repeated so consistently that it begins to feel like a natural law of life. Education leads to income. Income leads to security. It sounds logical. And in some ways, it is. A higher income can absolutely improve someone's opportunities. It can open doors, reduce certain stresses, and provide access to better options. But there is a quiet assumption built into that formula. The assumption is that income automatically turns into financial stability. And that assumption is where many people begin to struggle. Because income and wealth are not the same thing. Income is movement. Wealth is structure. Income is what flows into your life every month. Wealth is what remains after everything else flows out. Schools spend years preparing students to increase the first number, but almost no time is spent explaining the second. Students learn how to become engineers, doctors, teachers, analysts, designers, and managers. But they rarely learn how money behaves once it enters their lives. So people graduate with impressive earning potential, but very little awareness of the system surrounding that income. Rent absorbs a portion. Lifestyle grows gradually. Subscriptions appear slowly over time. Convenience purchases become habits. Debt quietly extends timelines. None of these decisions feel dramatic in isolation. Each one seems reasonable. But together they create a structure that slowly tightens around income. And because no one ever explained the difference between earning money and managing its flow, many people assume the pressure they feel is normal. They think the answer must simply be more income, a higher salary, another promotion, a slightly better job. But here is the quiet reality that often goes unspoken. If the structure surrounding money never changes, more income simply flows through the same system. It arrives faster, but it leaves just as quickly. This is one of the reasons two people earning the same salary can live completely different financial lives. One feels constantly behind, the other feels calm. The difference rarely comes from intelligence or discipline. It usually comes from something much simpler, awareness of how money moves. Unfortunately, that awareness is almost never taught early. The education system was designed to prepare people to participate in the economy, not necessarily to understand the mechanics of personal money inside it. So students learn how to work within the system, but not how to observe it. And without that awareness, people can spend years improving their income while the underlying financial structure remains unchanged, which leads to a strange and frustrating experience many adults eventually notice. They are doing everything they were told would lead to stability, and yet stability still feels slightly out of reach, because the rule that explains why was never part of the lesson. The rule that changes everything. So, if income alone doesn't create stability, what actually does? At first, the answer sounds almost too simple. Not income, not job titles, not even education. The real turning point begins with something most people were never trained to notice. Cash flow? Not how much money you make, but how money moves. Think about it for a moment. Two people can earn the exact same salary. They can live in the same city, work similar jobs, and face similar expenses. Yet one of them slowly builds breathing room over time, while the other constantly feels like they're catching up. Why? What creates that difference? It usually comes down to one quiet habit: awareness of where money actually goes. Most people believe they understand their finances because they know three numbers: their salary, their rent or mortgage, and roughly how much they try to save. But between those numbers exists a much larger story. Money is moving every day. Small purchases, automatic payments, lifestyle upgrades that seemed harmless at first. None of these feel like mistakes in the moment. In fact, many of them feel deserved. After all, when someone works hard and earns more, improving daily life feels natural. So why does the pressure still appear? Because cash flow behaves in a very predictable way that most people never study. When income increases, spending rarely stays still. It expands quietly to fill the new space. A slightly better apartment, more convenient services, more frequent eating out, a subscription here, a payment plan there. Again, none of these decisions feel extreme. But over time, they reshape the path money takes through a person's life. And once that structure is built, something subtle happens. Income becomes responsible for maintaining the structure, instead of strengthening the person. That's why someone earning more money doesn't always feel more secure. Their financial system simply became larger. So what is the rule that changes everything? It's surprisingly calm. Before trying to earn more money, learn how money behaves once it enters your life. Ask a simple question that most people rarely ask: where is my money going after it arrives? Not just the big bills, the patterns, the invisible habits, the automatic flows that slowly shape your financial life. At first, this kind of awareness can feel uncomfortable because it reveals something many people were never encouraged to see. Money decisions are rarely logical. They are behavioral. People don't spend only based on need. They spend based on emotion, convenience, stress reward, and sometimes simple exhaustion. A long workday makes convenience feel justified. A stressful week makes small rewards feel harmless. And gradually those patterns become normal. But once someone begins paying attention to the movement of money, not just the arrival of it, something interesting happens. Clarity appears, not instantly, but slowly. They start recognizing patterns that were invisible before. They notice which expenses quietly repeat, which habits provide real value, and which ones simply fill emotional space. And here's the surprising part. This awareness doesn't require extreme discipline. It doesn't require cutting every pleasure or living in constant restriction. It simply requires understanding the system that already exists. Because once you can see how money moves through your life, you stop reacting blindly to it. You start guiding it. And that single shift, from unconscious spending to conscious flow, is often where financial stability quietly begins. Not with a bigger paycheck, but with a clearer relationship with the money already arriving. And yet many people only discover this much later in life. Which raises another important question. If someone learns this rule late, have they already missed their chance? Or could late awareness actually become an advantage? That's where the story becomes more interesting. Why learning this late is still powerful. Many people discover these ideas later than they expected. Sometimes in their 30s, sometimes in their 40s, and sometimes even later. And when that realization arrives, the first reaction is often frustration. Why didn't I learn this earlier? It's a fair question. If schools spend years preparing people for adult life, why were the most practical money lessons left out? But there is another question that quietly changes the perspective. Does learning late actually mean it's too late? Or could late awareness create something surprisingly powerful? Think about it carefully. When someone understands money very early in life, they have time on their side. But they often lack something else: experience. They haven't yet seen how income grows, how expenses expand, or how lifestyle quietly reshapes financial behavior. But when someone discovers these patterns later in life, something different happens. They already understand the real world. They've lived through rising costs. They've experienced the pressure of monthly responsibilities. They've watched how money moves in ways they didn't expect. So when awareness finally appears, it lands on top of years of lived experience. And that combination can be incredibly powerful, because now the patterns are easier to recognize. Suddenly, things that once felt random start to make sense. Why certain months always felt tighter. Why higher income didn't automatically reduce pressure. Why financial stress sometimes grew even when earnings improved. And once those patterns become visible, something important changes. The focus shifts from reaction to prevention. Instead of constantly asking, how do I fix this month? The question becomes something calmer and more strategic. How do I design my money so this doesn't keep repeating? That shift might sound small, but it transforms the entire relationship with money. People begin paying attention to structures instead of emergencies. They start thinking about how income flows, how spending habits form, and how financial stability is quietly built over time. Not through dramatic changes, but through small structural adjustments, a little more awareness here, a little more intention there. Gradually, money stops feeling like something that constantly escapes control. And instead, it begins to feel like something that can actually be guided. Not perfectly. Not instantly, but steadily. And perhaps that's the most important realization of all. Financial clarity doesn't arrive through one big breakthrough. It arrives through understanding simple rules that were never explained clearly in the first place. Rules about how money moves. Rules about how behavior shapes financial outcomes. Rules that were quietly missing from the lessons most people received growing up. But once those rules become visible, something changes. The same income starts behaving differently. The same decisions begin producing different results. And slowly, stability becomes less mysterious, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because the system finally starts making sense. In the ing, if this idea made you pause for a moment, you're not alone. Many people are beginning to realize that the most important financial lessons were never part of the official curriculum, not because they're complicated, but because they require a different way of looking at money, a calmer, more honest way. If you found value in this conversation, consider subscribing to Unfollowed Money Rules. This channel exists for one simple reason: to explore the financial truths that are rarely explained clearly, but quietly shape the lives of millions of people. And if something in this video resonated with your own experience, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from noticing that others have been asking the same questions all along. Until next time, take a little time to observe how money moves in your life. You might start seeing patterns that were always there, just waiting to be noticed.